Hi, this is Joe Chambers. Welcome to Musicians Hall of Fame Backstage. Today's clip comes from an interview we did with Skunk Baxter. Skunk talks about how he asked for a guitar, got a bicycle instead, but he stayed focused on it, and he finally got him a guitar and became the great musician that we all know now. He talks about how he had his first band, the Tarantulas, and how he moved to New York and started working on 48th Street at Jimmy's Guitars, and then eventually with Dan Armstrong. Hope you enjoy it. If you do, be sure to hit like, subscribe, and the notification bell so you don't miss any of our new content. Once again, the great Skunk Baxter. Welcome back to Musicians Hall of Fame with Skunk Baxter. Skunk, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for being here, man. I've been wanting to do this a long time, man, and thoroughly enjoyed the show last night. It was Steve Cropper's 80th birthday party, and you, along with a lot of other great musicians, were there helping Steve celebrate. It was just wonderful.
Steve's a special guy, you know.
He is, isn't he?
You bet.
It's kind of generic. What we like to get started with is, how did you get started? You know, what made you? When did you know? How did you know? How old were you? Did you come from a musical family? All of those.
Well, I asked my mom for piano lessons when I was 5, and she did 2 wonderful things for me. She allowed me to take piano lessons, and she taught me to read books. So it allowed me to have a doorway into knowledge as a young person, and also allowed me to start learning the basics of music at a very early age. And so I studied classical piano for about 8 years. But when I was 9 years old, we had moved to Mexico City. My dad was transferred down there with J. Walter Thompson Advertising. Mm-hmm. And I wanted a bicycle for Christmas. And they bought me a guitar. Pissed me off. So I hung it on a wall. I said, you know. And then about 6 months later, a friend of mine who lived in an apartment downstairs said, his name was Kurt Bundy. Kurt said, I'm taking guitar lessons, and if I can, maybe I can, I see you have a guitar, and can I teach you some chords, and maybe we can play together? Oh, yeah, all right. So he showed me a couple of chords, and I don't know, something happened. It's just holding this thing and going, yeah, this is what I think I want to do. Mm-hmm. And of course, as usual, all I wanted to do was practice. You know, my grades suffered and the usual stuff. I mean, I still played a lot of baseball and all that, but no, I just immersed myself into it. And then I was already playing in Mexican rock and roll bands, and my dad had a DJ friend of his in Washington, D.C., where we had, you know, where I was born, where I lived when I was young. Mm-hmm. And he sent my dad a lot of records. And he sent my dad 2 LPs by Howard Roberts, Color Him Funky and H.R.'s The Dirty Guitar Player. And I listened to those, and that was it. I said, that guy is I want to play like that. And it turns out, later on in life, you know, Hugh McCracken and Dave Spinoza and Tim May and all the cats, we all started listening to Howard Roberts when we were kids, you know. And I actually got to meet his son Jay, who was a monster player. Yeah. You know. But this is one of those things where you find something that connects a bunch of you. Right. And it was Howard. And then later on I got to meet him, and then later on we started teaching together at the Guitar Institute of Technology. I even got him a guitar synthesizer, and boy, you talk about light and dry grass. Right. It was just an amazing thing. So him and the Ventures, I joined the Ventures fan club when I was 11 years old. Sent Bob Bogle a letter, right, which he returned and said, you should buy a Fender Jazzmaster, right, which I did. And later on, when I got the chance to know them and play with them and tour with them and produce records for them, again, it's this wonderful, special circle where things come back around. So the two people that I admired the most as guitarists, I got a chance to play with and get to know and be part of my life. So
You're unique in the fact that 9 times out of 10 it was Scotty Moore or the Beatles on Ed Sullivan Show was what so many
sure.
people said that was what happened to them. Now Scotty said there wasn't anybody really that he heard it, he just started playing, but most everybody has a Howard Roberts or
Sure.
somebody like that,
And most kids at my age listen to the Ventures.
Oh yeah. Did you know Noki well?
Very well.
And Noki was a good guy, I knew.
Oh.
And I bought Don's Jazzmaster. I got it here in the museum.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Yeah, so
That's fabulous.
and I love them too. That live from Japan when they're on stage with those white Fender amps, that's awesome.
That's it,
Yeah. So what was your first band? When did you start playing out live?
It formed a band called the Tarantulas. I was 11 years old, and I met some guys in Mexico, Abraham Laboreal, great, frightening bass player and super guy. We had a surf band, and so we were doing some gigs, and a friend of a friend of a friend knew someone at the main radio station, the Radio Éxito, which, 50,000 watt station, knew somebody. So we took our instruments up there to play. And somebody cut, as they did in those days, a lacquer of the performance,
Right.
and they started playing it
Yeah.
on the radio.
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden, people sort of knew who we were. And we're just a bunch of snot-nosed kids, what's going on. And I was introduced in the Mexican rock and roll scene to a bunch of different bands, and the Mexican rock and roll bands were awesome. Killer drumming, killer playing, and they would, mostly copy American songs, translate them into Spanish, but they'd rock the crap out of them.
But guitar is a mixed or Spanish instrument.
Well, yeah,
right?
certainly.
After the Tarantulas, what was the next step for you?
Around that time, my parents moved back to New York, and I started working in music stores on 48th Street. And I ended up working at Jimmy's music shop. I actually was walking down the street to buy some strings, and Jimmy Squalacci, Frank and Jimmy owned the shop. He was trying to explain something to a person that spoke only Spanish. And you know how it is, you talk louder and slower, right? Well, that wasn't working. So I just walked over and I translated for the person who wanted to buy a classical guitar. And he said, how'd you like a job? And I said, well, I would love that, except I can only work during vacations because I live in Mexico and I don't necessarily have to go home, but I go to school in Connecticut. He said, doesn't make any difference. 3 weeks at Christmas, 3 weeks at Easter, and work during the summer. I said, you can't beat that.
Yeah.
I thought it was cool schlepping 100 Fender twin reverbs up 6 flights of stairs in the middle of summer in New York City for $1.25 an hour. Hey, what the hell? What did I know? And then because I had grown up in Mexico, there was nobody to repair any of my gear. So I learned through trial and error. My dad gave me a copy of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers radio manual, which actually Leo Fender used the passive equalization.
Oh, really?
from that.
Wow. Yeah.
And then like any other kid, you stick a knife in a toaster, you learn very quickly which direction the electrons go. And I had met a gentleman who was a TV repairman who helped me understand a little bit. So by the time I got to New York, I was repairing guitars, and guitars weren't going out of Jimmy's for repair. And everything on the rest of 48th Street was going up to Dan Armstrong's shop. And so Dan came down one day and he said, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm sort of the guitar repair guy besides the stock boy, cheap bottle washer, and a head schlepper.
Right.
And he said, I'll tell you what, I'll offer you $5 an hour to come work for me. And in 1964,
That was a lot of money.
mucho dough.
Yeah.
So that really changed my life because every guitar player came into dance shop because it was the only game in town, really, except for a little bit of stuff that I was doing. So I really learned a lot about building guitars, customizing guitars, guitar electronics, repairing guitars. And so I worked at Dan's place for 2 years and met, again, everybody, every great guitar player.
Right.
As a matter of fact, Andres Segovia came into the shop one day. He was playing a concert at Carnegie Hall, and one of the tuning machines on his Ramirez had broken. And he brought the guitar in, and we're going, what do we do? So I thought, okay, I'm going to go across the street to Charles Ponty because he's the cello and violin guy, and maybe.
Right.
And he did. He had a set of machines, so I put the machines on, finished doing the guitar, and brought it out to Mr. Segovia. He was sitting on the couch out there. Meanwhile, out in the foreroom, I mean, we would repair guitars for a couple hours, and the rest of it was just to hang. So out in the other room was Mike Bloomfield and Frank Zappa, Sam Brown. I mean, just, frightening guitar players. And they're all jamming, and they're all standing up, and they're all rocking, and Andres Segovia's just sitting there politely watching. So I handed him the guitar, and I said, in Spanish, sir, está arreglado, creo que está bien, tócalo por favor. And so he started, and then of course everybody shut up because he was playing acoustic. And he sat there and he played the first 64 bars to the Concierto de Aranjuez by Rodrigo. And I didn't know what to say. I mean, here is Andres Segovia playing one of the greatest pieces of music ever written for Glasgow guitar. And then he turns to Mike Bloomfield and Zappa and all those guys and says, "You don't hang it around your neck like a canoe paddle." And he sat there, and even though I did stand up a bunch, most of the time I sat down because, hey, if it works for Andres Segovia, it works for me.
Right.
And everybody else sat down afterwards. They just, eventually all stood up to perform it, but everybody sat down, I believe out of respect for Mr. Segovia's insights, shall we say.
Yeah.
So the being at Dan's place opened up just incredible doors to incredible players, and they'd come in every day. So my job was to play rhythm and bass. So Dan set up a guitar with 4 regular strings and 2 bass strings and said, "You're going to learn to comp bass and you're going to learn to comp chords, and here's how we do it." And so when all these other guys would come in, like say Sam Brown, Eddie Deal, geez, talk about incredible musicians. Al Caiola, this is incredible players. My job was to sit there and comp bass and play chords. And then later on, Les Paul called me. I had met Les at Dan's shop, and Les had called and said, "Skunk, I'm doing a thing for VH1, and nobody knows any of the songs." I said, "Skunk, you need to play with me." I said, "Sure, Les, I'd be happy to do it. And you got to play bass. Any bass players know their damn songs." So all of that knowledge that came from the music that Les Paul made famous in a lot of ways and played sort of came back. So I had, between Danny and the Big Cold Ring Orchestra, the Fake Books, Mexico, all this stuff was like going to the College of Musical Knowledge. I was so incredibly blessed to be able to have this diverse musical input, plus the classical stuff.
Yeah.
Which stood me in good stead, and even playing in the Doobie Brothers, we used to have this running contest. I wore headphones on stage because I wanted to protect my hearing. Plus, I wanted to get a good mix. I mean, I don't care how many people are there. I'm sitting down playing. I mean, that's what I do. You guys do whatever you want. So for a while there, these guys were, messing with my brains. The basketball scores, all kinds of crazy stuff was coming through the phone. Meanwhile, I'm just trying to keep my head straight. So one day I had taken a piece of music from Beethoven's Sixth Symphony and used it as a guitar solo. Because after a while, you don't want to play the same thing over and over again. So, have some fun. So Tim McCormick, who was my guitar tech, they started, when different songs would come up that had solos that you could improvise on, 30 seconds before the song, they'd write a piece of music on a piece of paper and put it out on the piano, right on Mike's piano, and write the music. So the exercise was, I had to figure out in 30 seconds how to adapt that piece of music to the solo I was about to play. And I loved it. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that you love. Plus, having been a studio musician, this was not that difficult.
Yeah.
But this is the kind of fun stuff. And having all that background, you know, playing the Hallelujah chorus over the changes for Rockin' Down the Highway, yeah, I'm in.
Yeah.
You know.
Hey, now you played with Jimmy James and the Blue Flames for a little bit.
I played one night with them,
okay.
And you know, people talk about it. And listen, it was a thrill because I did a guitar that I had worked on, a left-handed Stratocaster that I was working on at Jimmy's. When Jimmy had come in the store, he had a beat-up Fender Duosonic, and I traded him even for this guitar because the guy I had done it for never showed up.
Mm-hmm.
I got docked 3 weeks pay for it, but he had asked me to come down, and that bass player didn't show up one night. I had a problem, so he asked me if I'd play, and I said sure. And after that, we did become friends. He was a very special man, too.
Hey, we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back.